My name is Layla Green. I'm 32 years old and I work in private equity, although my family still tells people I do something with spreadsheets. I've never been the emotional one, or the dramatic one, or the one who makes a scene. I was raised to be quiet, polite, respectful, so when my mother handed my sister the envelope at my wedding reception, I didn't say a word. She did it casually, like she was passing out hors d'oeuvres. We were standing in the sun-drenched atrium of the Bellwether Hotel, marble floors, glass ceiling, and 200 guests celebrating the most carefully planned day of my life. The envelope in her hands was thick, cream-colored. The same one I'd prepared to collect our wedding cards, each one from friends and relatives, many with checks, some with gift certificates, all meant for Marcus and me. My husband. But she gave it to Chloe, my younger sister, with a soft smile. "There you go, honey," she said. "This should help with your apartment deposit." Chloe giggled, clutched it like a prize, didn't even look at me. And then, louder for anyone nearby to hear, "Layla doesn't need help. She's already got everything." There it was, again. The line they'd been using since I was 15 and got my first scholarship. I felt my husband shift beside me, confused. A few guests hesitated mid-conversation. One aunt frowned into her wine glass. But my mother? She just moved on, smiling, gracious, like she'd done something generous. The rest of the room never stopped buzzing. Clinking silverware, toasts, laughter, but in my chest, everything fell completely silent. Not because of the money, because of the message. This wasn't just a wedding mistake. It was a pattern. A truth too familiar to ignore. And that's when I realized this day wasn't just a new beginning. It was also the last time I would let them decide what I did or didn't deserve. Growing up, I was the quiet one. Not shy, just careful. I learned early that in my family, volume meant value, and I never spoke loudly enough. Chloe cried at the right moments, smiled when adults looked her way. She was sunshine and ribbons, the golden child with ballet recitals and school plays. I was the one who fixed the printer, who helped mom with taxes, who knew where every spare key in the house was hidden, but rarely got a thank you. They used to say it like a compliment. "Layla doesn't ask for much. She's so low maintenance." But low maintenance always came with an invisible asterisk, so we don't have to consider her needs. I remember my 16th birthday. I'd asked for one thing, a second-hand laptop for AP classes. Instead, I got a card with no money inside and a family dinner at a place that forgot to take our order for 40 minutes. Chloe got a new iPhone 6 weeks later, just because. But I didn't throw a fit. I never did. I internalized. I studied harder. Graduated early. Moved out at 19. By 25, I was running financial models for companies worth more than our entire neighborhood. And still, every time I visited home, the comments would come. "She thinks she's better now. Don't talk about money around Layla. It makes her uncomfortable. Your sister's just different." I was different. I was tired. Tired of being the backup plan, the fallback. Tired of being the one expected to understand when others couldn't get it together. When Chloe wrecked her car, I helped her find a new one. When Dad needed help negotiating his early retirement package, I read every line of the policy for him, pro bono. But when I got engaged, no family toast, no celebration dinner, just a one-line text from Mom, "Congrats, let us know the date." I used to wonder why it hurt so much. Now I understand, because I kept hoping it would be different. Because deep down, I thought maybe, just maybe, when I finally did enough, achieved enough, became enough, they would see me, not just as a daughter or a sister, but as a person who mattered. Instead, on the day I wore white and said yes to the man who chose me without condition, they chose my sister. Again, I always knew I wasn't the bride my family had imagined. There was no Pinterest board for me growing up, no folder of magazine clippings labeled Layla's wedding in my mother's nightstand. That one belonged to Chloe. Chloe was the romantic, the one who cried during proposal videos and sketched wedding dresses in the margins of her notebooks. I was the planner, the spreadsheet girl, the one who knew the difference between a Roth IRA and a 401k before she knew what a wedding veil even cost. So when I told them Marcus had proposed, I was met with a polite pause. Not excitement, not tears, just, oh, already. We'd been together 3 years, lived together for one. But still, it felt like they were waiting for the catch. Like they thought he'd change his mind. And when he did, they changed the subject. I tried to involve them, really, I did. I invited Mom to tour the venue with us. She canceled. Twice. I sent fabric samples for the dresses, no reply. At one point, I asked Chloe if she'd like to help me pick a cake. Her answer, is it even going to be a real cake or one of those minimalist, no frosting city things? I remember laughing it off, pretending it didn't sting. But by the time we mailed the invitations, I'd stopped asking for input. Marcus noticed. He offered to talk to them, to invite his own parents to fill the emotional gaps mine left. But I told him no. I said it was fine. I told him I was used to it. And I was. The truth is, they never imagined me in a wedding dress. They imagined me at a conference table. Or maybe someday at someone else's wedding, taking notes for a speech, not giving one. They didn't hate Marcus. They just didn't know what to do with someone who respected me, loved me without condition. He saw the parts of me they never tried to understand. And that made them uncomfortable. I think deep down, my family thought I wasn't the marrying kind. Too serious, too cold, too self-sufficient. And yet there I was, dressed in ivory, laughing under string lights. Saying vows to a man who looked at me like I was everything. And still somehow, they made that day about Chloe, about her starting fresh. About her getting on her feet. As if my happiness had to fund hers. As if I'd done something wrong by standing in white and asking for nothing. It happened just after the toast. Marcus and I were still seated at the head table, my hand resting on his knee, champagne bubbles tickling the rim of my glass. The string quartet had just started playing something soft and familiar. Guests were finishing their mini desserts. The air was warm with laughter, flickering candlelight, and the sweet scent of vanilla orchids. Then I saw her. My mother. She walked, glided toward the gift table like she owned the room. No announcement, no request, no glance in my direction. She picked up the ivory envelope, the one with our initials in gold foil, the one meant for us. She turned to Chloe, standing just a few feet away in a pale blue silk dress that probably cost more than my wedding shoes. And with a smile so graceful it could have been rehearsed, she said, "Here, sweetheart. This should help with your security deposit." I couldn't move. I watched Chloe press the envelope to her chest like it was a medal. She grinned, not even pretending to decline. And then came the line, the one that's been replaying in my mind like a loop ever since. "Layla doesn't need help. Chloe's still getting on her feet." Said loudly, proudly. With the same tone she once used to brag about Chloe's perfect SAT math score, which, for the record, she didn't take. A few heads turned. One cousin actually paused mid-sip. Marcus blinked at me like he couldn't tell if he'd just misheard. But no one said anything, not one word. And I didn't either. I just sat there, in a dress I'd paid for, surrounded by people I'd invited, watching my mother redistribute what wasn't hers. I thought maybe my father would step in. He didn't. I thought Chloe might glance my way. She didn't. Instead, she tucked the envelope into her purse, my envelope, and walked off laughing with one of her friends. I remember staring down at my plate, untouched. I remember the cold edge of the silver knife against my finger. I remember thinking, this isn't about money. Because it was, not really. It was about ownership, entitlement. The quiet certainty my family carried that I would always be okay, so it was okay to take from me. Because I wouldn't make a scene. Because I wouldn't fight back. Because I never had. Until that moment. Because in that silence, as the string quartet swelled and I lifted my champagne with trembling fingers, something in me clicked. Not broke. Just shifted. They had mistaken my restraint for weakness. My silence for permission. They thought I didn't need the envelope. What they didn't know was that the envelope had never needed them. I didn't cry that night. Not even after the last guest left. Not when the candles were blown out. Not when Marcus rubbed my shoulder and whispered, "I'm sorry, love. That wasn't right." I just stood there, barefoot in the hotel suite, my dress half unzipped, staring out over the city skyline. Somewhere, Chloe was probably celebrating. My mother sipping wine, and my father likely pretending not to know what had happened. That was his way. But me, I was unraveling quietly, one thread at a time. The envelope was never about the money. I make more in a quarter than my entire family earns in a year. I wasn't counting on the checks. I didn't need the gift cards. I didn't even care about the value. What I cared about, what cut the deepest, was the message underneath it all. You don't get to be the center of your own day, because someone else needs it more. They didn't ask, they didn't warn me. They just decided, like always. Just like the time they gave Chloe my childhood bedroom without telling me while I was still at college. Or the time they borrowed my car while I was away on a business trip, then acted surprised when I asked about the scratches. Every time, I swallowed it, told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But weddings are supposed to be sacred. Even for women like me, the logical ones, the planners, the quiet daughters who never asked for attention. And yet, I had planned every detail, every seating chart, every vendor call. I stayed up nights customizing little notes for each table. And when it was over, the one thing that was mine, ours, was handed to someone else with a smile and no apology. I sat down at the vanity, still in my gown, and looked at my reflection. For the first time in years, I saw someone who had let it happen. Again, and I asked myself the question I had been avoiding for far too long. If they don't see you, why do you keep showing up? It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It wasn't even about justice. It was about clarity. About finally, fully understanding something I had resisted my entire life. I wasn't the broken one. I wasn't cold. I wasn't selfish. I had simply been raised in a family that only understood love when it looked like sacrifice. And I was done sacrificing. That night, before I took off my dress, I opened my laptop. And I logged into the thing they forgot I built. They thought the envelope was just an envelope. Cream cardstock. Embossed initials. Something elegant to pass around at the reception and tuck into someone's purse at the end of the night. But what my family didn't know, what no one knew, was that every single gift that day had already been accounted for. Literally, months before the wedding, Marcus and I had created a custom wedding portal through the bank I worked for. Clean design, secure, discreet. Each guest received a unique RSVP code linked to a secure, personalized landing page. The physical cards, just ceremonial. The real money, deposited directly into our joint wedding fund, a high-interest account I built myself. Every check scanned, every digital note logged, every transfer time-stamped and traceable. The gift envelope my mother handed Chloe? Empty. Well, not technically. A few unclaimed cards remained, those from elderly relatives who preferred pen and paper. But even those had been logged by the event assistant I'd hired, who discreetly recorded each envelope before the reception even began. I hadn't done it out of paranoia. I'd done it out of habit. I manage portfolios worth millions. Tracking details is how I breathe. What my family calls overthinking, the world calls financial intelligence. So while they smiled and whispered about Layla having everything, they were holding a prop. The real gift, every dollar, every kind word, every wish, was already exactly where it was supposed to be, with us. That night in our suite, I opened the portal dashboard. Total contributions, $28,647. 92. Verified senders, 74. Pending transfers, 0. Card claims made by Chloe Green, 0. I stared at her name for a long time. Chloe Green, 0 claims, 0 entitlement. And yet somehow, she was walking around that reception with the confidence of someone who'd been given a prize she had earned. But now I felt no urge to correct her. Let her keep the envelope. Let her hold it like a trophy, because I had something better, receipts, real ones, digital, time-stamped, and a growing sense that I no longer had to explain myself to people who never asked who I really was. That was the moment it clicked. They had taken nothing from me, but I had just reclaimed everything from them. Not with noise. Not with rage, but with design. It started with a text. Just 4 words, 9:42 a.m. the morning after the wedding. Is the money coming? No greeting, no punctuation, no shame. I was sitting by the window of our honeymoon suite, watching early sunlight pour across the hotel balcony, my coffee still warm in my hand. I stared at the message. Then came another. Mom said it was transferred already. Did you set it up through Zelle or Venmo? I didn't respond. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally realized. I didn't owe them an answer. Not anymore. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Chloe. Marcus looked over from his side of the bed. You want to get that? He asked. I shook my head. It rang out. Then came the third message. I tried depositing the checks. The bank said they were already processed. What's going on? There it was. The first crack in the illusion. Because all those checks they thought they pocketed, already mobile deposited the moment they were received into our portal. Most guests never even filled in the to line. They just left them blank, trusting we'd sort it out. And we did, efficiently, quietly, legally. Still, part of me expected Chloe to let it go. She didn't. That afternoon, she sent a voice note. Her voice was sharp, less confused, more accusatory. Mom gave me that envelope. You said the gifts were for both of you, but if guests gave cash or cards, how do we know they didn't mean it for the family? You already have so much, Layla. This is just petty. Petty, that word landed heavier than I expected. Petty is what people say when they've been caught stealing, but want to make you feel small for noticing. I waited, let her sit in the silence. And then, for the first time in a long time, I responded. The gifts were never yours to collect, Chloe. The money was transferred directly by the guests into our account. The envelope you're holding, that's decoration. Like the flower arrangements, pretty but empty. She read the message, and that was it. No reply, no apology, just read. For a while, I expected backlash. Maybe my mom would step in. Maybe my dad would call and try to smooth things over like he always did, with awkward small talk and guilt trips. But the only sound was silence. No more accusations, no more entitlement. Just the quiet realization that this time, finally, I wasn't going to undo their mistake. This time, I wasn't going to hand over what they thought they deserved. Because for the first time in my life, I let the transfer fail. And it felt like peace. I used to think I had to choose, be the bigger person or be the honest one. Swallow it or say something and ruin the mood. Smile through it or become too sensitive. But sitting there on the balcony, my coffee gone cold and my phone blissfully quiet, I realized. I wasn't angry, I wasn't heartbroken, I wasn't even surprised. I was just done. Done trying to decode passive-aggressive texts from people who never bothered to learn my middle name. Done making excuses for a mother who weaponized generosity and a sister who mistook access for entitlement. Done holding up a bridge they kept setting fire to. Marcus came out onto the balcony, placed a hand on my shoulder, and kissed the top of my head. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He had seen it all. The long pauses after phone calls with my parents, the polite deflections at holiday dinners, the way my voice would go flat anytime Chloe borrowed something again and forgot to return it. He never pressured me to walk away. He just built a world where I finally could. Later that evening, I opened my phone and deleted a few things. The family group chat. My pinned reminder to call my mother every Sunday. The shared calendar I had made for family birthdays, half of which they forgot anyway. I didn't block anyone. I wasn't interested in theatrics. I was just done performing. Some people think walking away is cruel, but here's what I know now. When someone keeps hurting you and calls it family, leaving isn't cruel. Staying is. They'll tell the story differently, I'm sure. She overreacted. She took it too personally. She always thought she was better than us. That's fine. Let them say whatever helps them sleep. Because for the first time in years, I was sleeping too, without guilt, without wondering if I should have just let it go. I let it go, all right. I let them go. Not with a fight, not with a final dramatic speech. Just with a quiet click and the decision not to return the next call. And that, I think, is the part they'll never understand. I didn't need to make a scene. I just needed to stop showing up to one. 2 days after the wedding, Marcus and I moved. Not far, just enough. Far enough that no one could drop by. Far enough that no one could say, we were in the area. Far enough that if they wanted to reach me, they'd have to mean it. The movers came early. We'd packed light. Just essentials, some gifts, and a single antique cabinet that had belonged to my grandmother, the only person in my family who ever looked me in the eye and said, "You don't owe them anything, baby. You've already paid enough." I left no forwarding address. Just a note for the building concierge, no visitors, no deliveries, return to sender. We didn't throw a big farewell dinner. We didn't post photos. We didn't announce it to anyone except our closest friends, people who never asked for more than we offered. Some people imagine a new marriage as a grand beginning. Ours was quiet, steady, gentle, no confetti. Just two people waking up in a new apartment in a smaller city with more sky and less noise. And for the first time in my life, my name wasn't followed by any roles I didn't choose. Not the big sister who always helps. Not the one who's already fine. Not the reliable daughter. Just Layla, a woman, a wife. A person who finally stopped trying to earn love she never really had. Sometimes I still think about Chloe, about the envelope, about whether she ever realized it was empty, not just of money, but of meaning. I hope she finds what she's looking for. I truly do. But I also know it's not mine to provide. Because that's what I finally learned. Marriage isn't just about who you say yes to. It's also about what you finally say no to. No to being the default. No to being taken for granted. No to being erased with a smile. As Marcus unpacked the last box and set our photo on the mantel, just the two of us, laughing in a field somewhere far from expectations, I felt something release in my chest. It wasn't grief. It wasn't regret. It was the sound of a door quietly closing, and a life beginning on the other side. It had slipped behind the gift table, wedged between a floral arrangement and the base of the bar, one small envelope. No glitter, no cash, no return address, just my name, in blue ink, not Mr. and Mrs., just Layla. Marcus found it while unpacking. It had been tucked into one of the leftover boxes we almost threw out. No one had mentioned it. It wasn't in the portal. And the handwriting wasn't familiar. I opened it slowly, expecting maybe a generic wedding message, a card someone forgot to hand off. Instead, inside was a folded sheet of heavy paper and a single handwritten note. Some people give money, others give meaning. I saw you today. Not the dress, not the planning, not the performance, you, the way you held your silence, the way you looked at your family and still smiled, the way you didn't flinch when the spotlight was stolen. That's not weakness. That's power most people will never understand. Congratulations on your marriage and on finally choosing yourself. And there was no last name, no signature I could place, just the letter N and a sense that somehow someone had been watching, not judging, not pitying, just witnessing. I folded the letter and placed it in the top drawer of my nightstand, not because I needed the validation, but because it reminded me of something I'd forgotten in the noise, that there's always someone who sees what others ignore. Not the show, not the status, but the quiet strength it takes to walk away without burning everything down. That card didn't come with a check, but it was the most valuable gift I received. And in the end, it was the only one I kept.